And we are recording. Welcome, everybody, to this latest Showrunner Huddle. What is this, our second kind of free public Showrunner Huddle for everybody? We do these every other week inside of the Showrunner course, but I'm excited that we're now doing more public ones. And this one especially because it's a really fun topic. It's all about launching your podcast. And so it's important to preface this session by saying, you know, you've already defined your audience of one. You've already named your podcast. You've already kind of got your branding in order for your podcast. You've even, as you'll see, conducted a few interviews, so even gone over your interview strategy a little bit. And this is now the point when you're ready to put this baby out into the world, to take your show from just on your computer, just inside of your little private workspace, and get it out there to everybody, get it on iTunes. And so we want to help set you up for success because you're putting in so much hard work to get your show ready to go that when you launch it, we want it to just explode on the scene and build as much momentum as possible. And so that is our goal today with the 15 steps to a perfect podcast launch. For anybody who just came in, there's a link up a little bit in the chat. It is rainmaker.fm/perfect launch. And so if you go there, you will be able to download this, the 15-step launch plan, as well as the ratings and review lists, which we're going to talk about later. And basically, the format of this presentation is going to be to run down these 15 steps, which we have inside of the Showrunner course, and we're bringing here to you now on this public webinar. We'll run through those, and then we also should have some time to answer your questions as well. So with all that said, let me introduce my co-host, Johnny Naster, and to all of you who showed up hoping for a new wonderful T-shirt, Johnny apologizes for disappointing.
Profusely.
But I like the flannel shirt too. It looks great.
I'm in the middle of a snowstorm right now in Canada, so it's not really T-shirt weather.
Yeah. All right. I guess that's a good enough
snowsuit on. I mean, I could. I took it
off.
You
still got your pleasant smile and overall just, happy demeanor.
And I'm drinking green tea. I'm not even drinking coffee.
Very nice.
It's going to be a very relaxing blab session, people.
I like that. So no rants. Are you promising no emotional rants?
None. Don't rant anymore. I gave it up for 2016. Gave up ranting. Yep.
My guess is that lasts about 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, I've ranted so many times on interviews and stuff. Yeah.
All right, everybody. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go. This will be relatively informal, so we can answer your questions as we go. But let's get started with this, Johnny. And let's start with number one on here, which is get your website up and running with at least one email sign-up box to start building your email list. And this is one of those things that you would hope by this point, especially people who have been following the teachings of Copyblogger, would take for granted. But not everybody does this because you can launch a podcast without having a website, right? You could, you could put it on, SoundCloud. There's a lot of different places you could launch a podcast without having a site. But we're all about launching a show and building an audience experience and using it as a stepping stone to build a business or even as a part of expanding a business that you already have. And that involves having a website, having a place that you can point people to.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also the thing that some people get hung up on. It's like being distracted with the wrong things, right? You are a showrunner, you're not a website runner. So although you need to have your own site because it needs to be built on your own land and you need to be able to gather people to your site and your show and get them on your email list, don't get so distracted with your site that you fail to launch or that you just wait until my site is perfect. Wait till I get the perfect logo. Wait till I get the perfect colors. Wait till I get 50 blog posts up. Just don't worry about that. Have a very, very simple website up at first. Remember, it will be the worst it's ever going to be is the day you launch. You can progressively make it better as you have time. So don't use it as a tool to procrastinate and not launch at all. That's not what we say. That's why we put it in number one, because we absolutely both agree that you absolutely need to have that. You can't put it off till after launch, but don't use it as a distraction. The most basic, simple website with an opt-in so that you can get people and start building the audience, which is the point to starting your show in the first place.
Yeah, and it's important to have in the beginning because, if you follow these 15 steps and you have a successful launch, you're going to get a lot of attention. And so you want to be able to maximize that. You want to be able to build your list and start building that audience. And you can't really build an audience if you don't have a place for people to go. And so obviously, with Copyblogger has talked for a long time about don't digital share crop. So you're not just starting a Facebook page and then, attracting, sending all of your attention there. You want to send people to your website. It's very, very important. So, okay, so we've got the website. And the other thing, I was reading a really good book earlier today, Johnny, where one of the chapters, it was either your business or your website is never going to be as bad as it is today. Like, it will always get better. In fact, that book was your book. Which is something good to remember. Like, put it out now. It's not going to be perfect, but, take solace in the fact that it will just keep getting better. And, your projects, my projects, we've gone out without them being quote unquote ready, but those were all important steps and you had to get started at a certain point anyway. Okay, so let's go to number 2. Have 1 month's worth of episodes recorded and in the can. Now, this is always a hard one for me to wrap my mind around because I'm never very good at this. I want to record one and get it out there to the world immediately, but we are really stressing patience. And Johnny, why is it so important that people be patient and make sure that they have several episodes in the can when they launch?
Patience, Grasshopper, patience.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason is that things are always going to happen, right? You're going to get sick. You're going to get a sore throat. Something's going to happen to your internet connection or your computer. Something's going to happen where you can't record or you can't publish on schedule and keep up. So the idea being you should start with enough already completed episodes in the can, completed when you launch, so that when something does happen unforeseeably, if it happens the day of launch or the day after, the week after, the month after, you are prepared so that you're not 3 weeks into launch, you're hitting the top of new and noteworthy, you're getting all this attention, and then, I can't publish an episode for 7 days because I don't have any, because something happened, whatever that may be, which is an infinite amount of possibilities. So why not? Plus, there's to me, it was 22 episodes, I believe I had when I launched Hack the Entrepreneur, because I was putting out a lot of episodes at the beginning. So I'm not going to tell you how many episodes you need, but you do need to have that 1 month buffer. So if you're publishing once a week, then you should have 4 at least in the can. And if it's only 1 a week, you should go for 2 months. Why not? The plan is that you are going to be podcasting way past episode 4 or episode 8. So why not record those now? To me, it really, it makes you, I think subconsciously, it makes you sort of step up your game, because you don't get the satisfaction of all your friends and everybody being like, whoa, I love your show, it looks great, all this stuff, because you're doing it yourself quietly behind the scenes. And so it really makes you you have no people telling you, I don't like this part, which you will get lots of. And there is a point in your show where you have to start listening to those people, but it's not before you launch, and it's not right as you're launching, because you should know your audience of one at this point. You should know what you're trying to do, what market and brand you're trying to hit. And then you need to just kind of put your head down and focus and not get distracted off the path that you've already set. You have to be distracted from that path eventually, because you do need to take feedback. You do need to know what the audience now actually thinks of your stuff. But if you start getting too, the only word I can really think is wishy-washy, meaning that I don't know, but you don't want to start doing that too soon. You want to really know from the get-go that this is how it's going to be. This is how the show's going to be. This is how the show's going to be. Then spend that time. And this took me just over 2 months before, from starting to work on my show to launch. And that seems hard and that seems long, but it works so much better because you'll get a better product out of it. You're really confident in what you're doing. You're figuring it out. You've had enough time to, I remember when I went through my first 5 episodes, and then I actually changed stuff and went back and changed those 5, but it wasn't live. It didn't matter. But then I did give it out to a few people to kind of get their just different, people I really trusted, not just random whoever can listen and whoever can just tell me what they think. Everybody's got an opinion, but not everybody's trying to make your show. And those people probably aren't even the audience you're trying to hit with your show, which are really bad people to get an opinion from. So that being said, I guess I'm ranting again in 2016.
I was going to say that's a rant, but it's a good one. Good one. And I will add to that, remember, what we're talking about in this session is the perfect podcast launch. And frankly, a perfect podcast launch should probably go above and beyond your normal schedule. And so one of the benefits of having episodes in the can and having your first month ready to go, especially early, because frankly, early on, your processes aren't going to be as good, especially if this is your first show. You're not going to be as efficient. It's going to take you a little bit more time to do things. But if you want to do a perfect podcast launch, you want to be doing some bonus episodes. You want to be able to do a little bit extra. And so having those episodes in the can will allow you to not just be scrambling to keep your schedule, but hopefully be able to go above and beyond. And so that's another really important part of it. And it relieves a little bit of that pressure early on, again, when you're not as efficient, because it's going to take you a little while to get there. So that's another bonus of doing that. Leslie just joined. Leslie, welcome to Blab. She says, thanks. I have created a podcast coming soon page and finally got my website rebranded. Excellent. That is wonderful to hear. Can't wait to get your show going. Better late than never. Absolutely. Okay, so number 3. Actually, real quick, before we get to number 3, everybody watching right now, we'd like for you to do a quick favor, and that is tweet this out. So Blab has this beautiful little tweet button over there. You can hit the button, and I believe when you tweet it out, we'll create this really awkward GIF of me and Johnny to be sent out to your Twitter followers.
I'm recording one right now.
Yeah, but we would love for you to tweet this out. It'll just help us spread the word about the showrunner, and so that would be greatly, greatly appreciated as we go through here. And that, of course, what I just did was a call to action. And the reason I did that, number 1, to get more people here, for you to tweet it out, but also to preface this next section, which is add a solid call to action at the end of each episode, asking for a rating or a review. So it's very important, this perfect podcast launch phase that we're in, we want to focus on iTunes. Is it because iTunes is the be-all, end-all, and the only place people listen to podcasts? No. But it is the place where most people listen. And it is the place where you'll get the most bang for your buck in terms of time and energy. And, if you don't know about New and Noteworthy, and we'll talk about it some, but there's about an 8-week period where your show qualifies as new and where you can really get that New and Noteworthy bump. And part of that is getting ratings and reviews. And so it's very important to have that call to action, that clear call to action in your episode that you want folks giving you a rating or a review on iTunes. Johnny, do you have any suggestions for how to maybe phrase that call to action or any other ways to guide folks in making that a successful call to action?
Just be repetitive, meaning that usually when a call to action, because you are, so I guess to be clear, this is not like the steps you do sort of like from day 1 of launch onwards. This is like when I say you should take 2 months to be creating your show before you launch, these are the things you have to go through. So you can be working on different call to actions and then see which one sort of feels best for you, but you haven't launched yet, so you don't know. But the trick with calls to action, I think we've figured this out.
That's on next week's episode.
Exactly. Is that usually when you start to get bored and think that, everyone's going to be tired of hearing this, that's when they're just starting to actually hear it, your listeners. So this is like a general sort of call to action or marketing sort of way to think, is that you think that it's repetitive and you think that you've said it in the last 20 episodes, but by the 20th episode, people are just starting to clue in and be like, oh, he really wants a rating and review from me. Oh, he really wants me to get on that email list. So you do have to just, when we say one call to action, one solid call to action, I don't just mean one solid call to action per episode. I mean, keep that solid call to action across at least 10 episodes at a time, because you're not going to see the effect of it immediately. It's absolutely essential that you're bored of it, but people listening are just starting to hear it. It's just the way it is. People are doing a lot of things when they're listening to podcasts, and we just have this sort of ability now to just start to tune out when the person starts to talk about in any sort of advertising or marketing sort of way. And that's okay. That's why you just have to repeat it. And you have to say it over and over again, episode after episode after episode after episode. And remember, when you start getting bored of it, that's when they're just starting to hear it. So keep going for a long time after that. It will work. It always, always does. But don't think that you are the listener, and it's a completely different thing. you and them, and you're going to be bored, but they won't. They'll just start hearing you. So stay repetitive, stay repetitive, stay repetitive.
Yeah, and Leslie asked, can listeners give just a rating, and can they then later add a review? I believe so. I think you could just go rate and then later go in and write a review if you wanted to. Totally. And the other thing is too, like, make it this thing that you do with your audience. It's not necessarily just like you're just asking them for this rating or review. Let them know why. Like, a lot of people don't understand the benefit of it. But if you say, hey, we're launching this podcast, ratings and reviews have a huge impact on how many people see the show on iTunes. And we, Johnny and I are really excited about teaching people what we know about podcasting, creating more showrunners. And if this show is making a big impact on you, leave a rating or review so it'll help other people find it and they can find the same benefits that you have. And if you want to transfer that enthusiasm that you have for them leaving a rating or review to them so that they kind of feel that and they feel part of something bigger. And that will, I think, help people not just go do it like, okay, let me go do this real quick, but yeah, let me go leave a rating or review too. And even guide people, in your review, let people know the number one thing that you've taken from our first 5 episodes. What is it? That'd be a great way to leave a review. The more that you can do that, and then also making it easy. A lot of times, like, you can, I think if you go showrunner.fm/iTunes, I think we have this URL set up. We did at one point. It'll redirect to our iTunes page, which makes it easy. And you found an even easier way to do that, didn't you? For linking people directly to it?
Jason just mentioned it in the chat box. So it's getpodcast.reviews. Yeah. Beautiful. And that you set up this really interesting link for leaving reviews. So if you went to hacktheentrepreneur.com/review, it takes you directly on if somebody's on an iPhone or an iPad, it'll literally take them right to the review page. Because as we all know, that going to iTunes and sometimes on your device trying to find out how to leave a review is not easy. I really hope iTunes figures this out, because now that I'm working with Amazon makes it so, like, as soon as the second you finish a book, the first thing it says is, want to leave a review? And it's like, you literally do it right on your device. That's amazing. Why don't they do, like, you listen to this podcast, do you like it? Why not leave them a rating and review? You'd think they'd want to encourage the ecosystem, but I guess they don't need to, because so is Amazon. Amazon's overwhelmingly large. But so this one that Jason mentioned, though, getpodcast.reviews, it's simple. It takes like 2 minutes. You set up this magical sort of link and people can leave a review almost immediately on their iPhone device.
Let me ask you a question here. How do you balance during the launch phase wanting to ask for reviews, but also wanting to ask for subscriptions? Because we know that you shouldn't split your call to action. You don't want to have 2 calls to action. How do you balance both of those desires?
My first, I'm going to say 50 episodes, I actually didn't ask for reviews. Like, not on the show. I asked for reviews personally and to people and anybody I could find, and anybody that went onto my email list, I emailed them back and asked them, or anybody that emailed me and like, I love the show, or would ask me a question about something. The PS was always, did you leave me a review yet? I would love it. But otherwise, I had a very simple plan. I had a very simple website. The website was set up to get people to join and subscribe on iTunes. That was really all my focus was for the first 50 episodes. And every single episode, all I said was go to hacktheentrepreneur.com and check out the show notes for this. I've added all this extra stuff for it. And that was it. Just go to hacktheentrepreneur.com. Go to Hack the Entrepreneur. Go to Hack, until I started getting like 100 people a day, 200 people, 300. And it works. It takes time, but I still to this day, my call to action is go to hacktheentrepreneur.com.
So you just want people going straight to the site.
And it's my job to set up my site to have one specific thing for people to do when they get there. Now the one specific thing is to get on my email list, not to subscribe anymore, because there's enough people through iTunes and they are subscribing. I'm good on that front. So really, it's still get to my site, and I can change my site to be whatever, to do the one thing that I want to do. So my focus was always go to the site, because to me, it was too hard to go to iTunes. It's like, it's vague, right? It's not hacktheentrepreneur.com. It's like, that's specific. It was just go here, then that funnel back to iTunes, subscribe. And then it's like, then hopefully you'll leave a rating. But
What it also does is it makes your calls to action evergreen, because now, because you have a show that is not time sensitive. Like, I can go back and listen to your early episodes and they're still very relevant. Yep. Whereas if you're doing a show like the Assembly Call, where it's very time sensitive, this is much less of a deal. But for yours now, people can go, and your call to action, or what you want people to do and how you direct them, has changed based on your website, but where you're telling them to go is exactly the same. So your call to action can, in a sense, evolve with your listeners without it ever changing, which is a really, evolve as your show evolves without it changing, which is really nice.
Okay. And so I'm being asked in here by the good doctor, whose first name I don't know. I'm sorry. But Leslie. Yes. So when I launched and told people to go to my site and show notes, did it say to leave? No, it didn't at all. It actually literally had a giant iTunes button under my player that said subscribe. So I'd have to go back to the Wayback Machine thing and look at what my site was, but I had a super I did it myself on WordPress. It looked bad, but it worked. But there was the player, and then right underneath said subscribe how you want or something. And there was literally a giant Stitcher button and a giant iTunes button. Both of them went right directly to my page, which also I don't know this for a fact, but I've talked to other people, and directing them directly and seeing iTunes, I think algorithm picks it up. If there's activity coming through straight to your iTunes page, not vaguely finding you through search, because they don't know that you sent them that way. But if you're sending people directly to an iTunes page, they take that as interest and something that's that people is popular, right? It's like they're not doing all the work. It's like you're constantly sending them to this iTunes page. They see like 100 people a day, 200 people a day. It's like, whoa, we should. And I think the algorithm pushes you up because it is popularity. That's what it is, right? It's not just random searching and then them finding, which is them just providing their service, you not actually helping them at all. So that was why I made my funnel exactly like that. And I think to a certain extent, I think that's why I really, really kind of rocked out the New and Noteworthy really well, because I set up that simple funnel. Go to my site. Then my site was go to iTunes.
Well, I like that. I think we need to edit number 3 on here. And instead of a solid call to action asking for a rating or a review, it should be a call to action sending people to your site, and then decide what you want them to do based on your site. And then you can direct them once they get there. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the big question, is it better for people to subscribe or leave a review?
It's always better to subscribe. Like Amazon and iTunes.
Wait, let's clarify. Subscribe to the newsletter or subscribe on iTunes?
Sorry. Subscribe on iTunes is what I mean.
I'm not sure what the questioner means, if they mean subscribe to your email list or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes.
Okay, so the way I was answering it is subscribe to podcast. Exactly. Okay. It's always better to get the subscription on a podcast, because that's a vote in favor of your show in its popularity. When somebody leaves you a review and they're not subscribed, iTunes obviously knows, and they obviously know that you're not actually leaving a review. You just are doing it because you're friends or something, or you were paid some way to do it. It's like Amazon. You'll see right on Amazon, again, why Amazon is so much better at this. It says right beside the review, verified purchase. They track it, because they'll weigh a review with a subscription way better than they will just a review without a subscription. You've never listened to the show.
Yeah.
And always focus on the subscription. Always focus on the subscription. And that's what you want. And then hopefully that will lead them into a review, or you can push later. But at the beginning, for your first 8 weeks, you need to be kind of manually, and we're going to go over that part, but you need to really work off of that stage to be getting people to review, to subscribe and review. But right now, you want your listeners, the new people, to just subscribe, always subscribe.
So what would you say about preference then between an email subscriber or an iTunes subscriber, and how you should direct people?
At the very beginning, it's...
you need to have both available. Clearly, you need to have both available for folks.
Of course, exactly. With Showrunner, we went to email first. With Hack the Entrepreneur, I was all about subscribe to the show on iTunes. For that 8-week period, I wanted to get noticed by as many new people as possible. And I wanted to, if I got somebody to listen once, I wanted them to send them to my site, subscribe through which would then push me up even further and get me in front of more people. I started with an audience of 0, and I needed to get in front of as many people as possible. I wasn't worried so much as grabbing maybe 100 of them onto an email list in the first 8 weeks. I was worried about getting thousands and thousands of new people hearing me for the first time in that 8 weeks when iTunes would push me up in front of their audience.
And I guess the difference is that when we launched the Showrunner, we had the course in mind. And so we immediately began building the course email list, which was, eventually going to be the sales list for the course.
And we had the lead that could promote it with you. We had Hack the Entrepreneur with me. We had Copyblogger in general and Remix.
Yeah.
We had an audience.
Yep.
Like already that existed that we could bring to this. I didn't have that. I was starting a show from scratch with nothing. And so that was the process I went. I think most people are probably in the case that I was in, rather than having Copyblogger and other popular shows backing them.
Yes.
So then I would focus on getting that subscription, making iTunes see that you are a popular show, and they will move you up, and they will put you in front of thousands and thousands of people daily.
And part of the reason for that is because of that 8-week time window. You can get into new and noteworthy by being noteworthy later on, because that is a manual process. But obviously being new and noteworthy helps you get in there. And there's that 8-week time period. So just because you're doing it at the beginning doesn't mean that you will always be asking for the reviews over email subscriptions, for example.
Well, of course.
Right.
Of course.
So, but in this early part, because of that bump that you can get, and every show sees it, once you get a new and noteworthy, it's really important to focus there. So we spent a little bit of time on this, but I think it's important because, it is going to be a little different depending on your show, depending on, what you start out with, what your goals are, but be very intentional about that. Okay. Number 4, write and publish show notes for your first 3 episodes and make sure to clearly ask for subscriptions to your show.
So this goes with having the site set up in a very basic sense with the call to action that you want. Making that call to action, as we mentioned again, so you want to launch with 3 shows, always with 3 episodes on the first day of launch, but also have the appropriate show notes. If you can make those show notes as good as you possibly can, because those might be the first ones people go to look at, and you want them to get more value. Don't just do a generic repeat of what is on the show, what they might have already heard. Give them the links, give them everything you talk about, give them all of that stuff, because that's extra value, and that's sort of an additional thing to the show audio version itself, and it'll keep people coming back to your site. When they get to your site, have that very clear call to action to get them to subscribe to your show through iTunes. I wouldn't even hold it against you. I might even encourage you to ignore Stitcher altogether. Ignore everything else except for iTunes. There's going to be some people who are going to be like, well, I'm not on iTunes. But I don't care how much effort you ever put into Stitcher, into SoundCloud, into everywhere else, 80% and more of your listeners forever are going to come from iTunes. So to not just solely focus there is kind of foolish. You're spreading yourself too thin. You've got a new show. You're trying to figure it out. You're trying to get ratings and reviews. You're trying to get people to help you promote it. And you're trying to release new shows. It's a lot. So focus on one thing and make that iTunes, if anything. If you want to do iTunes and Stitcher, which I did because I thought it was easy enough to just do 2, but no SoundCloud, no any other directories, nothing. It was literally just, I want everybody going to iTunes.
And the other thing is you can wait for people to ask, because for instance, if you're not on Stitcher right away, people probably will ask. Yep. And instead of just having it there, now can kind of be this thing that you do based on an audience request. And then you can make kind of a big deal about it and be like, hey, we're on Stitcher now. So many of you have asked, and now we're on Stitcher, and you can tweet it out and you can send an email about it, and it's exciting. And even if people aren't on Stitcher, they kind of see you expanding and growing. And so it kind of, it has 2 benefits. 1, you focus all your time on iTunes. And number 2, you kind of save some bullets for later on when you need just a little injection of enthusiasm. And to you, it may seem like nothing. And even to the, it may not seem like it's that important, but those little steps, it constantly shows that you're growing and you're taking the next step. And that's important for your audience to see that they're part of something that's constantly moving forward. And those little things can help you do that. Okay, by the way, I hope I didn't distract you when I was kind of bopping around. Whenever we make funny faces, we can just assume that we're recording a GIF.
At first, I was like, what's the other? Like, oh, he's recording another GIF.
Yes. Okay, so this is a good one here. Do research in iTunes to choose the category that makes the most sense. And this is important because, a lot of people will go into iTunes and they search by category, and they'll go into what's hot and they'll go into new and noteworthy and see what is there. And you want to make sure that you're showing up in the category that's relevant for you. And you don't need to choose just one category. You can choose 4 or 5, I believe, correct?
So through iTunes, you can choose 3, but we with Rainmaker and with Libsyn, you can choose 6. It works out too. So this should actually be updated too, because it's not clear enough where we say category actually means subcategory. Because a subcategory, I'm in, my main category is marketing and management, which is a subcategory of business. But that places me in marketing and management and business, which is 2 categories, which is awesome. So you want to always do that. And Rainmaker allows you to do that, and so does Libsyn, to choose a subcategory rather than just a category. And then you can change all of this at any point. It's not like you don't have to make this decision and you're stuck with it. You can play with different categories later. You should kind of default know your first subcategory that you want. Be like, okay, well, this is where I listen to all the shows. This is where I'm really into it. This is where my market actually is. But then that's what my management marketing is definitely there. But then there's careers, there's health and self-help, there's education where there's shows like mine. So you have to kind of think creatively and strategically and be like, well, this one's not as competitive, so I can probably rank a lot higher. There's less people looking in there perhaps, but if I'm near the top in the top 10, I'll get seen by a lot more people. So even a huge percentage of a small amount of people is more usually than a tiny fraction of a whole bunch of people. So be strategic. Your first subcategory is probably really going to make sense and just be obviously this one. But then after that, you really have to do the research and be creative.
All right. So number 6 is set up your Libsyn or Rainmaker account to host your podcast and feed. Now, again, this seems pretty basic. Obviously, you need your feed, and we can take number 7 with this.
Yeah, 6 and 7, yeah.
Yeah, validate your feed with a feed validator. This is very important. Feeds can be really, really finicky, and sometimes they fail for something as simple as literally an invisible character in the subject line. I have had a feed bork on me because I copied over text into a headline, and I couldn't even see it, but it copied over some invisible alien character that then in feed validators would bork it. And, my feed is cutting off now in iTunes after a certain point, and I'm just racking my brain trying to figure out what's going on. And it's something that simple. And so you really, we just had this happen. One of the shows I host, Podcast on the Brink for Inside the Hall, Alex IM'd me the other day. It was about 2 weeks ago. He's like, dude, we're at episode 103, and the feed was only going up to 85. And we're trying to figure this out, and we're looking at a feed validator, and it's stopping at 85, and we just had to go unpublish a few episodes. We're still not sure what the issue was, but we finally got it to where it would be updated. But it's just a lesson that you want to pay attention to your feed. And it can be really easy to kind of set it and forget it, and you're putting out episodes, but you never go look at how your show, looks in iTunes, how it's showing up, what the experience is. I think, for almost every show that you do, and I have 4 or 5 of them, but I always go in and do this. I just go in and look at how it looks in iTunes once a week, just to make sure new episodes are getting in, just to make sure my title looks how it is. 98% of the time, it looks exactly how I think it's going to. And then there's a couple times where one of the titles looks weird, or, my description isn't what I meant because there's a typo in it. Or actually, it was kind of funny with the assembly call when you looked at the description. I think I might have sent you this, Johnny. When you looked at the description on the mobile app for iTunes on an iPhone, it cut off. What were we saying? These guys assemble, but it cut off after the second S. And so it was these guys ass. And it just looked really weird, just because of where the word cut off. And it's just one of those awkward things. You can just rearrange the wording, but just see how it looks. And the other thing, too, with setting up your feed is, pay attention to your title, to the author, to the description, to the metadata that you're giving, because you want to make sure that when people search for keywords relevant to your show, that you will surface. So no one was going into iTunes searching for assembly call. They were going into iTunes searching for IU basketball podcast. So I needed to have in my title, assembly call, IU basketball podcast and postgame show. Those words needed to come out in my description, in other keywords in there. And that's where you set that up. And the beautiful thing is, All you have to do to edit your feed in iTunes and everywhere else that it is just edit your feed. Rainmaker makes that really easy. Libsyn makes that really easy. But it can be a really easy thing to set and forget. And I actually recommend that you set and kind of go back just every couple of weeks and just look at it. Just check, just make sure. Again, most of the time it'll be okay, but you can really never be too sure with those things because it could be the difference between your show not getting found at all and it getting found hundreds of times because people are searching this specific keyword.
Yeah, exactly. And it's surprising how often it actually screws up your feed somehow. Yeah. And so actually a little tip or hack, I guess you could call it, that I use and that, I mean, that coders and programmers have mentioned to me to use, and so now I do it, is I write up my show notes or blog posts or whatever in right in Rainmaker or right in WordPress, but then I copy and paste that and I post it into a notepad document or a text document, depending on what device you're on, and that actually strips away the stuff that you don't see, those weird missing parts, and then you can just post it back into your site and it will get rid of a lot of the stuff that will destroy your feed. Those weird invisible characters and stuff that HTML creates, the notepad files will get rid of it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I hate about feeds, but just know it going in, anticipate that there will be issues, and that way, just set a to-do list and just check it every couple of weeks. Plus, and it's nice, you can go in and read your reviews, kind of see where you're showing up. It's just good to know that information.
Yeah, just as you set up your feed, like leading up to launch, as you're getting ready and getting more shows ready, go to Feed Validator and put your feed in. Don't try and do it. The amount of panicked emails I've received from people and tweets like, oh my God, I'm supposed to go live in 4 days and iTunes turned down my feed. It's like, dude, have you gone to Feed Validator and you look and it'll tell you the errors and you have to fix them. Like, I've honestly never seen somebody create a feed and just submit it to iTunes and it works. Feed Validator, there's always something goofy and you just have to fix it and make it better, but don't leave it to the last minute. Keep this handy for the 2 months leading up to your launch and know that you have to do that well in advance of needing to be live on iTunes.
Yep. Okay, Johnny, I really like number 8. Book 3 guest spots on other podcasts in your market. And the benefit, why don't you explain the benefit of this one? Because you've explained it before, and I like how you explain this one.
I'm wondering
not seeing other podcasts in your market as competition, but instead,
totally.
Yeah,
So the other shows, sometimes we enter a market, right? Whatever market you're going to enter, and you think of the other shows in the top 10 and the top 20 and the top 50 as competition. They're not competition. When I'm obsessed with business podcasts, it's just how my silly brain works. And when I don't just subscribe to my favorite podcast. Whatever market you're in, you don't subscribe to just one show on that, do you? You subscribe to probably 3, 4, 5, 10 of them. So that means that these people are actually just people who already have an audience that specifically is into what you are creating. So you need to reach out to them as a friend, as somebody entering the market, and you're not competition. Don't think of yourself as competition. The people who are in the top 10 of any market or the top 20, trust me, they don't see each other as competition. That's why they are where they are, because they know that you need to kind of cross-promote on these things. So
wait, Harry Duran from Podcast Junkies just showed up. Stop giving away our secrets. He's competition.
Harry.
Sorry, everybody. We're canceling the rest of the show.
But he told Twitter. So
okay.
Welcome, Harry. So as you're leading up, that's why you need 2 months again to lead up. But don't look for the top 3 shows, because being somebody who's just starting, you're probably not going to get onto the top 3 shows. But look at the top 50 podcasts and try some of the quote unquote smaller to medium sized shows. They still have loyal audiences. What if it's 100 people and 50 of them want to come over and listen to your show? That's massive. It's a huge start from 0. So find 3 and reach out. You might have to reach out to 6 or 7 or 8 until 3 say yes, but have it so that you record either an interview about your show that can come out, say, the week of launch, or that you have interviews lined up for at least the first week to 2 to 3 weeks after launch, so that you can get them published before the 8 weeks is up. Because that extra promotion, because these people, just think of them as people who are just 6 months or a year or 2 years ahead of you, building an audience. They have people that know, like, and trust them. They will listen to that person, that host, tell about you and your new show and how they should check out your show, and they will. This works better than anything I've ever seen because it's not like you're promoting to just Facebook and only 30% of those people listen to podcasts, which is the general population percentage, I believe. But you've got people who actually consume podcasts in the market you're entering. They are the ideal customer. Trust me, you want to have this planned and you don't want to be running on like week 6 trying to get onto a show. So plan it beforehand.
I'm gonna tell you another benefit of this too that I like is, especially early on, if your podcast is teaching certain concepts, as you go through your first episodes, you may be teaching these or explaining these concepts for the first time. Now, maybe you've understood them for a while, you've worked with them for a while, but there's something a little bit different about structuring a podcast episode, teaching these, explaining these. When you go on someone else's show, they're going to ask you questions and they're going to ask you to distill your information, what your show is about, your concepts in perhaps even a more concise way than you do on your own show. And that process puts you in a little bit of a different type of pressure, a little bit of a different situation that challenges you to explain it even better. And I've always found that I come away explaining my concepts better to my audience because I went and explained them to someone else's audience based on the questions and the context of their show. So even if it's very similar in your market, the context may be a little different, the audience may be a little bit different, the show format's a little bit different, but it will actually help you in the long run create a better experience for your audience because of the challenge it provides and just the way that it makes you think about your own concepts differently. So it helps from that perspective as well. Leslie has a question.
How do you get booked on another show? I've told my audience I'm starting a podcast, and some people who have no podcast or big audience have offered to be on the show. I'm not so interested. So how do you get booked on another show? You ask. So you send an email if you can. And for people who have shows, they're typically people who do interview shows in your market. They are looking for other people, especially somebody with qualifications like you have. They are definitely looking for people like you. You're somebody who is a podcaster, so you have the right microphone, you have everything set up to do it, you know what you're doing, so therefore you're an easy guest for them, and you are really, really valuable to their audience. Obviously, think about it in the fact that when you go on their show, you are not there to promote your show, you are there to specifically give serious value to their audience. And by doing that at the end, when you give a call to action about your show or the host gives it to check out your show, they will, because you haven't been just pitching them the whole time. But definitely, it's really not any harder than just sending a simple email, being honest. Like, they're not competition. They are not competition to you at all. They literally are looking for people like you. You will help their audience, and in turn, people will be helped even further by getting to find your show and getting more resources for the topic that you're covering.
Yeah, and in terms of how to get booked on another show, build relationships and explain the benefits. So if you have relationships with people, that's going to be much easier, to suggest that you should be on their show because number one, they probably like you, and number two, they already understand the benefits that you'll bring. But if you want to get on a show where you don't have a relationship yet with the host, then you have to explain what the benefits of bringing you on will be. And Johnny just did a good job of explaining what those might be. Because the concept that you have, that, what you talk about will bring value to their audience for X reason, because you have a good setup. And so it'll be easier for you. Being an easy guest is an important reason. So explain those benefits concisely, build relationships, and that'll help you get on other people's shows.
And the point where you say, I already have a blog and a platform, but even then, I wonder if they'll be interested. So just in everything I do, and that I hope that I can put this forth to everyone else, is that why wonder if somebody will be interested? Like, don't just sit there, ask, what's the worst? You're not on their show already. What's the worst? Ask reasonably, ask nicely, be human, and build the relationship with the person. But you honestly don't know. Why even wonder if they'll be interested? They might be sitting there wondering, oh, I wish you would ask or want to come on my show at some point. They've probably read your blog, and there's this weird thing where neither of you are asking. Just go and ask. The worst they can say is no, and you're already not on the show. So it's kind of the same thing, except you haven't asked. So it's always the benefit of just doing it. You don't know. It's always a no if you don't ask, but there's a huge potential of it being a yes if you do ask. It sounds simplistic, but it'll change your podcast. It'll change your business by just being willing to ask.
Yes. Number 9, we will refer you to the second download right here. This is where you're going to identify 15 people, friends, family members, co-workers, 15 people that you have personal relationships with. You probably don't want to just ask random people to do this. This is 15 people you have relationships with that you can ask for ratings and reviews, because it goes along right there with what Johnny was saying. The worst that people can say is no, and it's always a no if you don't ask. And you'll see, again, we are stressing a lot the new and noteworthy, the iTunes angle of this podcast launch, because there is a time-sensitive nature to it, and because you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of time and effort by doing this. And so we know that getting subscriptions, that getting ratings, that getting reviews, that all will help your show surface more in iTunes. So don't just ask your audience, ask people. These can be family members, these can be friends, these can be your podcast co-hosts, perhaps, for on other shows, but ask them to leave your reviews. And to add some accountability to it, create a list, almost like a to-do list, right? With the person's name, with their information, if you need it, so you can then check it off, not just after you ask them, but after they actually do it. And I have to be honest with you, Johnny, I thought this was kind of crazy when you first proposed it, first started talking about it. I really wasn't that big a fan of it, but I think it's really, really useful because it gives you accountability to, because these are people who should do this. You know, and if you're really putting your heart and soul into something, and if you're enthusiastic about it, and this is important to you, then the people who are important to you are going to want to help you out. And so there's no reason to feel bad about doing this, and there's no reason to expect that people won't help you. And sometimes people want to help us, but they may not know how, and they may appreciate you having this very specific, easy, quick thing to do where, hey, you can help me. Like, you know, my parents enjoyed doing this, and these are the kind of people who will do this, but they may never think about it. And so it's, you know, it's a great match of people who want to help you anyway, help that you need, and you just give yourself some accountability by writing it out, and maybe you jog your memory because thinking about your mom made you think of her friend who still lives in Indiana who might be able to do a podcast review also, that kind of thing. So that's the usefulness of this. And I have to say this, especially if you are new to podcasting, or if you're new to being online, or just new to asking people to do things, I have always been pleasantly surprised by how much easier it is to ask people to do things than I think it's going to be, and how much more receptive people are than I think it's going to be. I might have talked about this on a recent episode of The Showrunner with the Assembly Call. We've had this idea of becoming a listener-supported show and asking people for donations, and it's taken me so long to get comfortable asking, and we finally did it 4 or 5 episodes ago. We started using our mid-roll to do this. And as soon as we started doing it, we have gotten monetary donations, significant ones, after every single show we've started doing it, just by asking. And people are excited. And the donations are bigger than I thought they would be. And it's so much more comfortable now to ask, just having done it once. And so this kind of goes with the same thing. I know it can feel a little weird asking people for ratings and reviews, but if you communicate to people how much of a difference it will make to you, they will do it joyfully. And if they don't, then you might have picked the wrong person, or there may be some other like reason there. I don't know why, but people really will. So your job is to transfer your enthusiasm onto them, and then it's pretty easy for them to follow through with what you're asking them to do. And it can make a huge, huge, huge difference. I awkwardly stopped right when you were in mid-sip there.
I actually picked it up. I thought you were about to stop, and I thought it would be a good time for everyone just to take a breather. But I know you were against this at the beginning, and I'm glad you come around to my way of thinking.
Yeah.
That's always cool. But I think that it has sort of another side benefit, which is sometimes we are from the selling world and sales and stuff, we call it like selling from our heels, where we're kind of like apprehensive in our call to action on our show because we're not comfortable asking for people to do something, which is not as effective ever. You have to be confident. You have to know that your show will help people and you want it to get in front of more people. And by asking 15 friends or family or coworkers, people you already know, it does help you with that confidence. One thing, because it's easier to ask people you know, and that's 15 people that now you're kind of getting used to it and you're getting more comfortable with that call to action of asking. And then when it comes to just confidently doing it on your show, you're good to go.
Okay, now, and let's clarify. The part that I really had a problem with when it came to this is, so let's say that you're at dinner with a family member. You ask them to leave a rating or a review. They don't do it right away. Maybe they get up to go to the bathroom, but they leave their phone right there. Would you grab their phone and leave the review for them?
You can go through some of my reviews, and there might be some that look like they were written by me, perhaps. I'm not above those kinds of tactics. No, I think that they work and they have their time and place. So you have to go back and listen to. It's like in the first 5 episodes or something I did of the showrunner. We did an episode, and I talked about how you have to not be above like stealing your friend's phone when you're at the bar having a beer, or you're at their house and just like going onto their iTunes and leaving a review. So yeah, it's watch your phones around me, because I will leave a review for my shows on it. But you got to do what you got to do, right? You're a showrunner now. You're not just a podcaster, and you need these ratings and reviews no matter how you can get them.
That's right. Okay, so based on number 9, you might think that you have already submitted your show to iTunes, right, for this launch phase. You have not. You are actually making that list of 15 people before you even submit to iTunes. It's all part of that planning process, so that you're thinking ahead, so that you have this ready to go, so you can hit the ground running when your show is in iTunes. Because number 10 is submit your podcast to iTunes. And that is an incredibly simple action. There's a link right there in the PDF document. You submit it, you provide a few pieces of information, you hit submit, and they let you know it's under review. And then at some point and I don't know if they still did this based on what you said in our last show, but I know in the past, I've always gotten an email saying that your show has been approved with the URL, with the iTunes URL. But either way, it's, it can be 24 hours, it can be 72 hours. You wait and you hope, and you're there on pins and needles waiting for your show to get in iTunes, so that you can then do all the rest of this that we're talking about. But that's it. You submit, and it's pretty simple. Most of the work is done getting your feed ready. There's nothing in iTunes that's very difficult to do. And then number 11, be patient.
Okay. So number 10. So today is the 8th of January. We're telling people it should take about 2 months to go through all this and get ready to launch. Yep. So my show, Jared, my very first podcast ever, is launching on March the 8th. I don't know where that lies on the calendar for during the week, but what day should I submit to iTunes? My launch is going on the 8th. That's when I want to go live to the world, and I've told everybody leading up to it that that's when it's going to be live.
On March 8th?
Yeah. So okay. Can I submit on the 8th to iTunes? And
that would not be live. You're going to have to wait. So here's the interesting thing. March 8th is a Tuesday, all right, which means that there's, because I would always give at least 72 hours to even 96 hours just to be sure. And that's business days is what I would do. So if it were me, I would submit, and again, you said the 8th, that's a Tuesday. I would submit it on Thursday the 3rd, frankly, because then you've got Friday the 4th and Monday are 2 business days. And then you've got Saturday and Sunday, which you just don't know about. So I would submit it on Thursday, the Thursday before.
So not Monday, because you'll probably miss the Tuesday. And you don't want to do it, say, like February 14th, like right before you go out for Valentine's Day dinner. You're not like, well, I'm going to get it into iTunes really soon. That way I make sure from launch, right? Because why wouldn't you want to do that? I would think.
Well, because your new Noteworthy clock is going to start when it's in there. So right. You want to make sure that, you want as little time, obviously, between when it's submitted and when you start, doing your full blitz, your full launch blitz. But you don't want to tell everybody, hey, the podcast is there. You've got this big email sent out. Everybody's excited. And then they go to subscribe and there's nothing there because now you've killed your impulse.
Jess, I fully agree. Like they are so it's random. I mean, it's not random because it's manually done, right? So it takes, depending on the volume at that time of new submissions, people have to actually go through and approve it. But you want it, it's a fine line between 1 week and like 4 days in advance. You want to do it because you definitely want to be on iTunes when you launch. Otherwise, it's a hard thing to do. But you don't want to be 2 weeks in advance or 3 weeks because you have 8 weeks only and you're eating into that. The second they approve you, your 8 weeks has begun. That's just how it works. And you can't be like, well, I'm launching on the 8th, so get me in there. They don't even respond. They don't care. They're iTunes. So
Hey, let me ask you a question real quick. So we often talk about, start now, don't procrastinate. Let's say that you're going on vacation in a month, right? But you want to launch your podcast. Would you tell someone to launch before they leave, get it out, get going, but they're only going to be there for about 4 weeks of launch? Or would you say wait until you get back from vacation so that you can fully focus on your 8-week launch?
I would say, why are you going on vacation before you launch a podcast?
Yeah. Vacation.
Come on, we're showrunners. We're not like So I would get to, like, if you're going to do an interview show, I would start interviewing people next week. Why not? Get started on the process. Do not launch before, because you're gone for a week, and that's crazy to be gone for a week right at the beginning of the launch of your show. I think that's a terrible idea. But I wouldn't say, well, just put it off till March and maybe start on the show then, because it's a big, at least 2-month process to get ready to launch. If you have a week in there that you're not working on it, it's going to be possibly 9 weeks or 10 weeks, but that's cool. At least you've started and you've kind of hit the ground running. And I hope that you've hit the ground running so hard before your vacation that you don't even enjoy your vacation because you just want to get back and work on your show. That's when you know you're onto something good, and you're gonna just skyrocket after. But otherwise, just, why are you going on vacation? Start a show. Come on. This is the year of podcasting.
While you were talking, a really exciting moment that only podcasters will appreciate just happened. I'm looking up at the top of my Twitter stream right now, and it says, Roman Mars liked a tweet you were mentioned in. Kind of cool.
That is kind of cool.
Anyway. Okay, so.
All right, well, we're done here.
We're done. See everybody. All right, so 11, be patient. All you can do is wait. Okay, number 12. This is your favorite one. Why don't you explain this one?
So this goes to people still, I don't know. So just like the president is what I say. So your show is now live. You are launching on March the 8th. March the 8th at 8 a.m. your time, or whenever you wake up. You should go to iTunes. You should subscribe to your own show and then leave a rating and a review for it. There's nothing worse than seeing somebody asking me for a rating and review for their show, and they haven't even left a rating and review for their own show. You get weighted the same because you subscribe. And as I say, the President of the United States, the highest office in the world, I think, he gets to vote for himself. So why can't you? You should. You are the showrunner, and this is your show. You should be willing to take the time, the effort to at least spend 2 minutes leaving a rating and review. You can say, this is my show, and I think it's going to do this, this, this for you. Don't be like, John's the coolest, and I can't believe this show is so awesome. Like, you can say it's you. That's totally fine. These things are automated by iTunes, so they're not reading and approving them. But if you subscribe, then leave a rating and review. One thing shows other people that you've been willing to do it and that you stand behind your own show. Plus, it's an immediate subscription and an immediate review, and that does help kind of get the signals of iTunes moving for you. So please leave your own review. If you haven't and you've already launched your show, go there right after this and leave yourself a rating and review. And
yes,
I don't know, tweet it to me.
Sure.
There we go.
Okay, really good question from Natalie here. What do you consider a show? A single conversation interview, or should it be a format consisting of various sections? What is more interesting for listeners? Well, your show is your thing. It's this thing that you're starting, right? So the showrunner is our show. The assembly call is my show. Hack the Entrepreneur is Johnny's show. And then within that, he has individual podcast episodes. And one of the reasons why we make the distinction between show and podcast is, and it's a bit of a controversial one because I've had discussions with Brian actually about this, about how we should use the term podcast more. And he does have a point that is how people understand the differentiation between what is a podcast show, what is a TV show, all these other shows. But our thinking on this is we want you to think of your show as a show because it's competing with all of the other, entertainment options out there and education options out there. And thinking of it like a show, like a TV show, TV shows don't just show up whenever they want to. They have a schedule and they stick with it, right? And they're accountable to an audience and they're accountable to themselves. And they're all of these kind of higher thoughts and higher goals of a show that we really want showrunners to aspire to, that we think that term encompasses more than just simply a podcaster who's creating audio episodes. Because it's not just about the audio episodes, it's about the experience, the show notes and the email and what you do on social media and doing these blabs and how you interact with your audience. So there's so much more to it than that. But in terms of your actual show, your series of podcast episodes, how you format that is going to be a function of the topic. It's going to be a function of the audience and simply what makes you comfortable. And, with the showrunner, for example, we've really evolved our format from what it was in the beginning. And this, just kind of works for us, having a few different sections, parts of it. And that's something that we can't answer specifically, but it's something not to get paralyzed about before you start. Whatever makes the most sense to you to begin, start that way. And then take feedback from yourself, take feedback from your audience, and then take feedback that you get just from trying new things. And then you can improve it and iterate it as you go. That's a great question. In fact, we could probably spend an entire blab session talking about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get through the rest of these. So that was 12. 13 is head straight over to the Showrunner Facebook group and let everyone know you are live. Now, if you're a member of the Showrunner podcasting course, you can do that, right? And that's one of the big benefits of being a part of a podcasting course, is having a community of like-minded people, who have similar goals, who understand, you don't have to explain to people in a podcasting course why a rating or a review is important. Everybody intuitively knows that. But if you're not in the Showrunner podcasting course, or if you're not in another course like that, there may be some groups that you can go to where it would be relevant to let people know that your podcast is live. I do an Indiana basketball, show. I would go into the Indiana basketball groups that I'm in on Facebook and let them know, hey, my new podcast is live. And hopefully you've built some relationships in there so you can say, listen to it. If you like it, it'd be great if you'd subscribe and leave a review, that kind of thing. So for this one, do what makes sense. But as much as you can leverage communities where you have good standing and have built relationships, that's really what number 13 is all about.
Yeah.
And then number 14, immediately start reaching out. Okay, so this is where we get back to this right here, your ratings and review list. Start reaching out to these people. And again, Johnny, I love what you have here. They won't all take action the first time you ask, so keep on them. Even these 15 people, your gold standard people, the most obvious ones, probably won't do it the first time. So just follow up with them and then make a little check mark when they're done. But those are the 15 that you should really be able to count on. That's why you have them on that list. And then, Johnny, if you want to talk about number 15, keeping on schedule.
Right. So publish new episodes on schedule. You can publish bonus episodes anytime you want, but you should establish a schedule sort of early on. And I actually didn't do this super well with Hack the Entrepreneur. I kind of put out a whole bunch of episodes, and then I scaled up in my publishing schedule as the audience kind of grew after the 8 weeks. But you should, like my show right now is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. I don't miss a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. And when somebody wakes up in the morning and they go to their commute and it's Tuesday morning, they expect my show there. They should expect your show there when you tell them it's going to be there. So if you tell them it's going to be there on Tuesday morning and they go Tuesday morning to find you and there's no new episode until Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday, what are they going to do? They're not going to be like, well, I guess I'm not listening to a podcast today. No, they're going to go listen to other podcasts. They're going to listen to other call to actions, and they're going to find other people to know, like, and trust, which is where you should have been. This is the simplest way for you to lose their trust in a very simple way. You've said you're going to do something. Do what you're going to say. Do what you say you're going to do, which is just publish on schedule. And because I do 3 a week doesn't mean it's my full-time job. So I can do 3 a week. I'm not saying you have to do 3 a week, but you should do at least 1 a week. I think after 1 a week, it's really hard for people to stay focused on you. But if you say Wednesday morning, my episode will be there, it should be there Wednesday morning. Don't forget that there's time zones. So when you say Wednesday morning, don't make it, if you're in Pacific, don't make it 9 your time, because that's already noon my time, Eastern. Make it like I publish mine at 3:30 a.m. every morning, Eastern time. That's for everybody. It's just noon. It's 12:30 only in the morning on Pacific, but it's everywhere else it's 3:30 and it's morning. So if the person happens to go to work at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning, your episode's there for them. Make it on their time, not on your time at this point. But publish it consistently and always at that same time, always that same day. And this will help your audience know, like, and trust that you will be there for them when you say you're going to be there.
Mm-hmm. And things may happen. There may be a time where just it's totally out of your control and you can't publish an episode or whatever. Let people know. Like, if you can foresee that, if you know something is just going to happen, let people know. That is 8,000 times better than just not showing up. And let me give you this little tip here from experience too, which is, if for some reason, if you want to set, if you want to hit a perfect date or whatever, and you feel like you may struggle for the accountability to hit that schedule, with all of the live video apps that there are now, schedule a live broadcast of the recording, because now you've scheduled something live where you have to show up, and maybe no one will show up, right? Like when I was doing the Primality Primers in the morning, one or two people may have shown up for those recordings in the morning, but just the fact that I had scheduled them and there was, I was going to broadcast it live, I always showed up. And so that's something that worked for me. You may need that, you may not, whatever, but whatever it is to add that accountability. Because again, that's to me what separates a show from just a podcast. A podcast will come out whenever. A show comes out on a set schedule. The showrunner, ever since we started, it's come out on Wednesday at the same time all the time. And the one time it didn't, on the week of Christmas, we alerted people and let them know beforehand that there wouldn't be an episode. And you've got to take it that seriously, because there is such a compounding benefit of the trust that is built when you show up day after day after day. You seem more professional. You seem more locked in. You seem more serious. And people just inherently grant you more authority because of that. So don't underestimate that, because it's extremely important.
And I wanted to bring up, that's why I put this up in your face, was because number 2 of this 15-part list was to have a month's worth of shows ready before you submit to iTunes and you go live. So since you have a month already in the can, those can just be preset to launch. You can just use scheduling in your Rainmaker or your Libsyn account, and it will go out at 3:30 a.m. on the day you say, at least for the next month, so that you can focus on all these other things and recording more shows and getting them in advance. These are things you have to do to be quote unquote professional. As a showrunner, you have to get into the idea of scheduling and getting it so that it's always consistent. You're not the last minute trying to get an episode done. You won't be doing that when you're launching, because you've launched with at least 1 month's worth in the can. So you have episodes. You don't have to worry about them. You have them in advance. So have them scheduled and you will be good.
Yep. And remember, being a podcaster is only a subset of being a showrunner. The showrunner is the person responsible for an audience experience. And one of the most important elements of an audience experience is being there when you say you're going to be there, and being there on a consistent schedule. Because people they start to plan their consumption around that, around when your show is going to be there. Don't let them down. And again, nothing's perfect and we make mistakes, and I've made mistakes on my own shows, but I can tell you that the times I regret are times when I set an expectation and didn't meet it. So it's so important to do that. And that is why we're kind of coming full circle here. That's why you want to have them in the bank, in the archive, in the can, so that you can schedule those. And if anything is going to happen, don't let it happen during launch, because that's when you really need to be building the momentum. This was fun.
This was fun. This was a lot of fun. Got a lot of people here.
We got a good question up here from Dare Dreamer FM. He says he had a great start with the show, even hit #1 in his category for a few days, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. And then since his new and noteworthy ended, his download numbers have dropped a lot, and it appears as if new downloads are plateauing. Any ideas to boost that? Tons of ideas. I think we've done an episode on this, haven't we?
And this is called Becoming a Showrunner.
Yeah.
And this is why we say have these 15 steps ready before launch, because that 8 weeks is so imperative to the growth of your show. Because literally the day after it ends, things drop. It's just because you're not in front of a massive iTunes audience of millions of people every day. But you have to now put your head down and continue being a showrunner and running your show for the audience that exists there, and trying to win over one new listener at a time. One more. You're not going to get these mass scales until you get like a really good guest on your show, or you get featured on another blog. Then these things will help give little boosts. But otherwise, your job as a showrunner is to try and win over one more listener every single episode. Keep your head down. You have to. Seth Godin from the business world calls this the dip. I've had 3 of them now with my show, Hack the Entrepreneur. Trust me, if if I listened to the dip and quit in any of those three, I wouldn't be where I was, and I wouldn't have seen on the other side these massive scales that just happened. But it's really because most people quit in that dip. Everybody makes it through now, through New and Noteworthy, because it's fun. Everything's there. Everything's going good. Use that momentum and keep going. Keep going, because on the other side of that dip, you've lost 95% of all podcasters, and the showrunners come out on the other side. Then you're going to hit another dip probably, and it gets even more, but that's just how it works. The biggest, your most favorite showrunners in the world right now, their shows have been around for years. Do not think that they never hit these massive dips. You are not you are literally, this is the ordinary thing that happens to all of us. Know that it happens to all of us, and just don't look at the numbers. If that's what it takes, don't look at your stats. Don't look at your stats. Keep putting out the best show you can, the best show you can, the best show you can. Look again in 2 months, see what's happened. But don't look daily, because it will be disheartening. It is. But it happens to all of us. That's where the podcasters stop podcasting. That's where the showrunners come out the other side. So please just keep doing it.
And I added a link here. There was an episode that we did about applying the principles of guest blogging to growing your show. And, you may be at a spot now where those tips could be really helpful. But I like this question. We need to put this down to actually do a specific episode on this.
And that's that's the idea too of the getting on other people's shows, right? That is guest blogging. I think that's what we went into there. That's kind of the guest blogging of the podcast world, because that's where now you can scale sort of laterally into new audiences. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
yeah, no. Let me now ask you Mac's question. Johnny, was there one thing that you did that maybe others did not do that helped make the biggest difference in getting you through your dips?
Yeah, totally. I ignored the numbers and I didn't stop working. I worked harder, and I just literally, all I can say is I put my head down. I hid in my office. I would try to record the best episodes I could possibly. If they weren't the best I could possibly do, I tried to re-record them with the guest, or I just didn't release them, and I only put out the best ones. And I loved it, and I was so happy when I gained one new listener. I didn't care about getting 1,000 new listeners or 100 new listeners or 10. I wanted one at a time. I went +1, +1, +1, +1, +1 until there's now like 10 or 15,000 of them to listen. But you don't just get to there. You have to just put your head down and work through it, because nobody else does, or very, very few of us do. And it's the ones who keep going that make it. Trust me, there's been days, like numerous times, where it's just like, oh man, this is hard, and maybe I don't want to keep doing this. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's like, you're not the only one who thinks this. Trust me. But it's when we get to the other side that it matters. Now, looking back, people can ask me that, but the real trick is that I didn't quit, and I tried to make my show better every episode, and I tried to get one new listener every single episode, and I was ecstatic if I could get one person more, because they would just multiply. That's just how it works.
Yeah. And be careful of the constant growth mindset. Also understand the nurture mindset, because we get so focused, especially in those early days. We see this rocket exponential growth on iTunes, and we want it to continue. And so when that dip eventually happens, we get a little bit discouraged. But I think that's a great time to step back and feel really grateful for the people we have, and focus on our last 100 instead of our next 100. And there's a few different ways to do that, because I've been really discouraged with the Assembly Call at different spots, right? And now we're in our 5th season. We're simulcast on the radio in Indiana. We're getting listener support. Like, all these great things are happening. But before every single season, I questioned whether I wanted to keep doing it. And actually, one of the biggest things I did that helped reinvigorate me was when I went to create the landing page for email subscriptions. And I sent out an email to our current email subscribers and just asked for testimonials. And so many people who I'd never even interacted with sent me back testimonials of how much the show meant to them that I had no idea about. People who were overseas, who thought it was their one connection back to their university and to their community, and like all these things. And I had no idea. And that right there kept me going, because I thought, you know what? Even if I don't grow in the next 6 months, I've got these people who love this show, and that's worth me going and creating something special. And of course, a funny thing happens when you do that. That natural enthusiasm helps you grow the audience. And so, I would really, when you get to that point, really stress being grateful for the people you have, and then doing something about it. Pick out 5 of your audience members and send them a thank you, just a thank you email for being an audience member. Not only will it help lock them in, it will make you feel better. And you remember that these aren't just numerals in the back end of a dashboard. They are individual people who give you their time to listen. And that is so awesome. And it is so great. And it is so hard to do and to build one by one, that the fact that you have 10 or 100 or however many you have is phenomenal. And sometimes you just have to get back into the mindset of what you did to get those people to get the next 1,000. So whatever you can do to get back in that mindset and rekindle that enthusiasm, do.
You just ranted. That was awesome.
Was that a rant? that was a pep talk.
Totally. Well, that's what I feel mine are too, but they've been called, quote unquote, called rants now. I feel like I'm giving pep talks. That was awesome,
right,
man.
No more. Okay, we won't call them rants anymore. From now on,
so
pep
true.
talks.
It's so true. You can't forget that those are people. Like, it's getting 100 people or getting another 1,000 people on your list they're not numbers. They're real human beings that actually want to interact with you. Don't forget about them at all. Mm-hmm. Like, seriously, you can have a really successful show with like 500 super dedicated listeners rather than 5,000 people who don't really care. You really can. It's not about amazing numbers. It's about amazing interaction and relationships with your audience. You're the host, you're the showrunner. Make these connections, make every single one of them count, and you will be astounded what will happen.
You will. I think that's a great point to end on. I believe. This was fun, though. We appreciate y'all being here. And I guess we should mention showrunnercourse.com. If you go there, there's a form to sign up for the email list. Now, we assume that most of you are probably on the email list, but I know we've gotten a lot of new faces who have come here of late. So if you go to showrunnercourse.com, it will get you on the Showrunner Podcast email list, which will get you show updates, yes, but more importantly, it will get you our initial Essential Elements of a Remarkable Podcast content series. And we are at work on a free course as well. And to get that free course, you'll need to be on that email list so that we can let you know about it. But that's who will know about that first. And then, of course, when we launch the course, you'll get notifications of that. So there are a bunch of benefits, but the big idea is go to showrunnercourse.com, join the email list, stay part of this community so that when we do the next Blab session, and we're going to be doing more of these, both free and inside of our course, you'll be alerted, you'll be there, because the more the merrier. We love you all being here, and the questions that you ask make these sessions so much better than we ever plan on them being. So we really appreciate it. Could you please share the URL?
Showrunnercourse.com.
Showrunnercourse.com. Yeah, it will redirect you.
I think you can also follow us on here, right? And get notifications.
Yeah.
When we're here.
Yeah, follow us on Blab.
I'm going to be here next week. I'm doing an audience session for 15 minutes. Blab's doing like an audience appreciation day for podcasters. And I believe I have 15 minutes on like Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it should be fun. So I'll notify it out. But yeah, follow us on here too, and then you'll know when we're on here next time.
Nice. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being here. This was fun, and we'll do it again soon. So listen to the Showrunner. We'll let you know when the next one's coming.
Yes. Take care, guys.